Hello, hello. This is a look at all of the LEGO Star Wars The Last Jedi figures that I have collected so far from the videos that I have reviewed as of the time of the recording and publishing of this video. The DJ promotional poly bag has not been released in my region as yet, so that is not included here, but I've got everything else that I've been able to pick out of the sets that you've seen on my channel. Like I did with The Force Awakens, I've separated these into First Order / bad guy stuff and then Resistance / good guy stuff. And the first thing I want to do is just kind of look at the full selection, because this is the first time I personally have had all of these together with the latest releases. I believe there will be more sets coming out specifically for The Last Jedi, but like I said, this is all that I have available to me as of the time of this video. I also have to warn you that there will likely be spoilers in this video, because I'm going to be talking most likely about some of the characters and their fates and how they show up in the movie and how they appear here as minifigures relative to how we actually saw them in the movie. So if you haven't seen the movie as yet and you don't want any spoilers, you probably want to just wait and not watch this video just yet. I've previously done videos like this for The Force Awakens, and I already did one of these videos for The Last Jedi based upon the figures that were included in just the first major wave, the first big release for this film. And since then, this board, this base plate full of figures, has been filled in quite a lot. And overall, I feel like there aren't many surprises in terms of inclusions nor omissions for what we're seeing here. Basically, we got most of the important named characters that got a lot of screen time, and we also got some of the secondary and even tertiary characters that got some screen time in the movie, even if they didn't last all that long. So that's a pretty decent balance, I think, for what they've done here. There's also a version of Porg that I don't have represented here from the Millennium Falcon, the Ultimate Collector Series Millennium Falcon, which isn't necessarily a Last Jedi specific set, but that is one creature figure that I've not included here, so please forgive me for that. We don't get a great selection so far of just generic, completely, truly unnamed troopers, though, at least on the Resistance side. I want to give some more careful, closer attention to some of the individual figures this time around, even though this is kind of a summary video. I think some of these deserve just a little bit closer look once again, like this Old Man Luke figure. This is one that a lot of people were certainly looking forward to, understandably. So I personally believe that I have a more positive outlook on this figure than many fans do. A lot of folks I've seen complaining that the robes are too bright and should have had more tan, and I can understand that, because to be honest, you know, the whole center section of the outer robe, so all of this down here, should be a very light tan. However, you know, I gave that some thought, and I worry that if they had gone with the full tan there, he would have looked too tan. I think it might have been just too much. The entire outfit that Old Man Luke had the first time we saw him in The Last Jedi, when he first revealed himself on the island, you know, he looked very bright. He had that almost angelic kind of countenance as he stood there before he kind of showed what his personality is really like in this part of the story, this part of the timeline. So, you know, it's a little bit of a subjective thing there, and I absolutely think that folks who think it should have been darker are correct, and folks who like it being lighter, I think, are correct as well. It's a subjective call that had to be made. Another thing that is a little bit of a controversy is the hair. You know, they didn't put any gray in this, and obviously he had graying hair. It wasn't fully gray. I think that this looks better to me, looks more accurate than a full light gray treatment would have, or even a dark gray treatment. I think that the closest thing they could have done, the closest they could have gotten it within reasonable production techniques, would have been to just highlight some of the locks with a light gray. You can't start with gray and then put the dirty blonde kind of highlights on top of that'll look very artificial, but maybe a little bit of gray, much like they did for the facial hair, right? That's kind of the closest approximation, I think, for his actual overall hair color is when you mix those two together. But at least I think the mold for this hair was very good, and it was nice to get some pretty decent printing on the back of that torso as well, and two fully done up faces. Snoke, I thought, was pretty well approximated in Lego form here. I think it's a really interesting looking figure. Of course, there's the the constant ridicule of him looking like he's in a bathrobe, which he really does. I mean, and he really did in the movie. The one problem with this one is that he is rendered as a normal height figure. But in universe and in the movie, I mean, he's tall. He's really tall. He's not even a little bit tall. He's not even like a tall human. He's significantly taller than a tall human. So rendering him just as a normal height figure is a little bit awkward, but I already gave you the spoiler alert, right? So we don't have to worry about anybody getting angry of me giving spoilers at this point. Dude got cut in half real quick. In the movie, he became irrelevant real quick. So not doing a specialized mold or not bringing back the Woody mold from Toy Story for the legs for this, I think, is excusable. You know, we needed to get a figure of him in some form, and as a regular size figure, I think he's fine, but he will always look a little bit on the short side relative to how he actually was during his short lifespan. I want to take another look at Captain Phasma as well, because on the left here is the Last Jedi version of her, and on the right is the Force Awakens version of her. And when you see these side by side, you notice that the helmet printing design is significantly changed. I mean, it's still the same overall shape, but pretty much every line has been moved around except for just the bottom pinstripe on the chin. They've very much re-sculpted the graphic design. The actual mold is the same, but they've changed the shape of the face quite significantly by changing the proportions around. And I actually had not realized that when I initially reviewed the one set this comes in, the First Order AT-ST Broken Legs set, but viewers did call this out, and I wanted to acknowledge that and show that on screen, that this is indeed a new and exclusive version of Phasma that we got in Lego form for The Last Jedi. While we're doing side-by-sides, I wanted to look at Rose as well. Of course, it was a character that needed to be made into Lego form, and I think it's quite nice that they did both versions of her. The original normal Resistance outfit version and the Imperial... I keep doing that, Imperial. The First Order officer disguise version of her. I think that they did justice with both of these. This is a character that in universe is rather short, so they could have rendered this as a smaller character, but I think that putting actual short legs on her, the child-sized legs, would have gone too far. So I think they actually did a really good job here, especially with the hair. I think that's one of the better, truly specialized hair pieces that they've come up with for a named character. I think it's on par in terms of accuracy and believability with what they did for Luke, and I'm surprised they actually went ahead and did a separate mold for her in the Imperial, again, First Order officer disguise variant. Of course, we also got Finn in both his Poe Dameron jacket and First Order forms, and in the First Order form he came in the same set as the First Order disguise Rose, which was appropriate, and he came in the same set as Phasma. And that was fantastic to get those three together, because they really go together. Very frequently, Lego will kind of spread figures out. It's difficult for them to create sets that really cover a specific scene when they end up having extra figures left over. They don't fit into the budget for a given set, or they need more figures, so they start pulling them from different places and different parts of a movie or whatever the source material is. So getting those all together was really good, and he got the all-important weapon of the Stormtrooper of 6 spins, which everybody loved. It wasn't that great of a battle in the movie, but, you know, made for some good trailer kind of drama build-up, and again, it was good to get the figure. One last side-by-side I want to do is for Rey, showing the 2 versions of her from the same place, but before and after she really got into her training. So I think the new one looks kind of simple, relatively speaking, but it really is in-universe. You know, the actual costume is pretty simple and pretty clean with its lines, and, you know, it just doesn't have too much styling to it, doesn't have too much movement. It's kind of relatively tight-fitting and athletic, and I feel like Lego captured that pretty well here. You know, they didn't try to embellish it at all. I think it's a pretty, the one on the right, I think is a pretty well done figure, if not as interesting as the previous versions and you know what we saw in The Force Awakens. So we also get the 2 different versions of hair here, and I think that both of those are fine enough. Maybe could have used just a little bit finer detailing. I feel like some of the edges on those are just a little bit too soft for the mold itself. So we got a Vice Admiral Holdo figure, and that was obviously important, and having seen the movie, I feel like they did a better job on this than I felt before I saw the movie, and just having seen what she looked like from promotional material, including the trailers. So I think this was a pretty nice inclusion. The only way to make it better would have been to have a specialized piece to hang off the back, which I guess could have been a printed and die-cut cloth piece. Perhaps that would have worked. It definitely would have needed some print on it, though. But I think this figure worked out pretty well. However, who she replaced for a time at the lead of the Resistance forces is not included in this wave of sets at all. Of course, I'm talking about Leia, and we did get a new trilogy version of Leia previously, but this was in her kind of casual outfit for going to the ground, and this is not how we saw her in The Last Jedi. I think that they may have done that intentionally, just not knowing what to do out of respect for the recently deceased. But given how powerful of a scene, whether you liked it or hated it, I think it was a powerful, emotion-inducing scene where Leia finally, after all these years, showed off the fact that she has force powers, the fact that she is a Skywalker. She did an actual skywalk. I thought that was pretty epic just from a metaphorical perspective, and I think we need to get that version of her as we saw her on the bridge of the cruiser. I think that exact outfit, that exact hairstyle, that needs to be done, and hopefully that will be covered in one of the 3rd wave sets that's yet to be released or announced. On the First Order side, I feel like we got a good selection, given the total number of figures, a good selection of unnamed characters, of just troops. And you need lots and lots of troops, and that's always been the case through the Star Wars movies. You know, there have been large masses of unnamed and practically faceless characters, and I think they've done a pretty good job just across the entire line, including bringing in plenty of variety. So even to the point of having both special forces and standard versions of the TIE Fighter pilots. We get 2 drivers in this wave, 2 Walker drivers. The all-important new Executioners, which have really good head prints on them, but their weapons are questionable. I'm not personally certain there's a better solution for that execution weapon, given the limitations of Lego parts. I mean, you can build up something that's fairly large that looks better, but I think without doing a custom mold for that, I'm not sure they could have done something that kind of gets across how that actually gets used better than this. But that's totally just personal opinion. We got a couple of First Order Snow Troopers in the second wave in the Defensive Crate set, and I still feel that those were awkward to include in that set, given that that scene was fully mechanized assault. There weren't any First Order boots on the ground as far as I could tell until after it was completely over. And like I said, after it was completely over, saw the movie, saw them walking in behind this guy. But during that assault, again, it's one of those cases where, you know, sometimes you need to add in figures. They probably did end up adding a good amount of play value for kids who got that set. A little bit more awkward inclusion in this line, though, was a single Flame Trooper. I don't mind it, though. I don't think I saw Flame Troopers in use in The Last Jedi. Please feel free to correct me if I got that wrong, or look for a comment that's already made the rounds if you're watching this a little bit later. But I like the figure. I like the design of the Flame Troopers for the First Order, so I really don't mind getting that at all. And I think that kids will appreciate having that to play with. And anybody who didn't have an opportunity to collect one from The Force Awakens and wanted to get one now can. And it was also very important to include Darth Ball in this series. I mean, some people call him BB-9E, but we all, as true fans, know that he is Darth Ball, and he is the real force between the dark side that has risen again in the Star Wars universe. So we got 2 opportunities to get those, and that was very good for folks who want to have the epic, the truly epic light versus dark, literal and figurative little battles there. You know something else that's missing from this selection? It's a better collection of things between the bad and the good. I mean, we get a Porg, and if you count the UCS Millennium Falcon, you get, you know, Porgs. But what about, you know, some of the relatively neutral characters? You know, Canto Bight was such an interesting location, had a lot of potential. I do feel like the scene and the use of that location didn't live up to its potential. You know, I feel like it just didn't have enough aliens. But there were some, including the one that goes up to BB-8 and thinks he's a slot machine. I think that would have been a great inclusion in this series, and hopefully that guy will be made at some point. If he's not made as an official Lego figure, I expect some custom folks to make some 3D printed version of him or something like that. Dabu Skay was his name. I don't know the official pronunciation of it, if there is one. But yeah, you know, just some stuff that's not purely good guys and purely bad guys would add a lot of flavor just to the new trilogy in general. Here's one last thing I've been looking forward to offering up for you. I'll look at the current state of the Last Jedi selection and collection versus what we ended up getting for The Force Awakens. Now, The Force Awakens did benefit from a longer period of releases. So again, this collection over here will definitely be increasing in size as we get those final sets, and I would expect there to be one more decent size wave with a few sets, maybe 4, something in that range for The Last Jedi, followed by maybe even a couple more later on down the line in 2018. That'll help fill things out a bit. But it doesn't look like The Last Jedi is going to catch up to The Force Awakens at all, at least in terms of the availability of different figures. I'm not too surprised about that, but here are a lot of the background side characters. I guess they're mostly bad, you know, if you look at it in that way, but the type of characters that are completely missing from this side of the board here, you know, the ones that are not specifically Resistance or First Order. So hopefully that's what I'm looking forward to the most, is seeing more of those guys over there, in addition to a Leia Skywalker. But that's it for my look back at these figures for now. Of course, each figure is shown in greater detail, including helmet off and alternate faces and all in the individual reviews for each of these sets. And if you want to check out just the builds, the actual structures and vehicles and things that these figures came with, I've done a separate kind of retrospective video just covering the builds for The Last Jedi up to this point. So thank you for watching. Hope that this had some useful entertainment value to you, at least, and I'll talk to you again soon.